today with Leslie. Leslie's been with Good Feet with our company for just about 10 years, with Good Feet in general like 14 years. And as most of you know, she is our inventory manager at this point, taking care of all inventory items, right? And I'm Sue Osted, and I'm one of the owners of Good Feet. And the reason we're here today is to talk about the line of supports that we carry, why we carry them, what they do, and who better to spend the afternoon with Leslie and discuss these kind of really cool things that Good Feet's all about. Some of the things that you see in front of us is we have what we've called for years and years an exerciser line. And that became confusing to the clients because some clients thought they only heard exercise, so they would go and exercise on these supports and on the orthotics. And that's not good. That's not what we want them to do. So in a good idea, the home office came up with calling it a strengthener. So if you hear me call this line exerciser, please just insert strengthener into that. It's an old habit. I can't guarantee I can get it out of my language, so I don't want you to be confused when I use the word exercise. Okay. So the strengthener, the reason they call it the strengthener and originally exerciser is the way the support's designed to work is it actually moves underneath the foot. A lot of people don't realize how much movement's underneath there. And why the support moves underneath the foot is because when Mother Nature made us, she was very smart and made us so that we move through our world as efficiently and as quickly as we can. So on the bottom of our feet, there's actually 18 muscles. There's only one on the top of the foot, and this is called the dorsal side and the plantar side. But 18 muscles on the bottom of the feet, and when you bring the health of your muscles into the right tone, is what we call it, so it's not too tight or too loose, in the correct tone, what that does is it brings health back into the feet. It's just like any other muscle structures in your body. If you go to the gym and you work out your muscles on your arms, you're going to see tone in that muscle. It's going to get healthy. It's going to get good blood flow through it. Becomes more stronger. It has more endurance. It doesn't have pain in it. And that's a really big part of what we do. So these are made to exercise the muscles underneath our feet. They work all day long while you're standing and walking and doing what you do. And that's why they became the strengthener and originally the exercisers, because they strengthen and they work on the muscle structures under us. So as you wear them, you get better and better. Your feet will become more and more toned in the muscles and enhanced. That brings the bones back into alignment in the feet as well. And you think about our bodies, our feet are only 2% of our body mass. And it carries the 98% everywhere we go. Mm-hmm. So when you put something on like an exerciser and you wear it all day, it has a dynamic change in the body, a dynamic change in our muscles, our tone, our structure. So a lot of times when you have people come in, they take an ink impression, we get very quick changes in how the foot is functioning by that exercising. So in that 30-day period when people come back, it's imperative that you take another ink impression. Always see if you can't compare the original ink impressions, what they looked like when they first came in with all of their areas that they're having troubles with, or their areas of concern, or even their way that they're wearing their shoes, and look at the ink impression in 30 days. I've been amazed how fast people's feet change, and the reason is because the foot muscle structure actually had a lot of tone already in it. It was just malaligned. So once that started exercising, the tone came back in the muscles and it aligned the foot into the ideal position of what the foot's supposed to be in by exercising. Now what's ideal? Ideal is how we're made to work. Yes. Ideally, Mother Nature knew what she was doing. So what these supports are designed around, and it's actually the original Alzner's designed around the ideal foot. And the ideal foot, the fourth arch, which we all talk about a lot, is that metatarsal rise, is actually a nice inward bump in it. And if you look at the hand, it's very similar to the bottom of the foot. There's an inward bump or a fourth arch even on our hands. They're very similar in structure, except for the muscle structure is very different because we do different things to our hands and our feet. Mm-hmm. But that little hole there is where our balance starts and ends with the body. If that hole or that fourth arch drops down and we become flat-footed, or we no longer have the bounce in our step, then what starts happening is the joints above it start following that. It doesn't have any choice. It's the foundation, just like your house.
Right.
If you get a crack in your foundation, what happens to your walls?
They just start falling apart.
That's right, they go wonky.
Right.
So if you had a really big crack in your foundation and you took and put some foam into that foundation hole, and would it correct the problem?
It would stop the problem, maybe.
It would hold it, but it wouldn't correct it, right?
Right, right.
So you'd still have a crack, but you'd be held there. If you had the crack in your house and you just went and took concrete and filled up to that, would that solve the problem?
Again, I think it would just stop it.
They just stop it,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's basically what a molded support does, is it just holds it in position. It doesn't correct the problem, it doesn't strengthen it, doesn't bring it back. But the way that our supports are designed with that dynamic movement, it actually is if you brought the house back to where it is supposed to be, back in its ideal position, and then you strengthen that area and kept it there. Then the crack would be able to resolve itself, and then it's a little bit of plaster, right?
Right, right.
Yeah. But originally it started with Dr. Alsner, who spent 20 years on developing the support. His goal was not to get the foot to be better, it was actually to align the body structure. And his focus was to make you stand straight, to make you stand tall, so you had that strength. It was in Europe for over 20 years, he had full access to all the doctors over there, all the podiatrists, and he built that mold. He ended his career up in Canada, and that's originally where the supports are. I believe they're still made up there in Canada, in Calgary. And that support was a real aggressive metatarsal rise. This one is a little bit smaller, so you can't see it as big as some of the other ones. But when you put that support on, you really feel that support. So Good Feet, what they did is they took the same mentality and idea, and they shaved down that support in the metatarsal. They found that they got similar results, if not exact results, but it wasn't so hard to get used to. And so they came up with a whole line of supports for that reason. The Classic is the first support that we start with on the demonstration because it's in the middle. It's not too strong, it's not too soft. It really brings the body in alignment. It's easy to get used to for most people. And it's something that is a classic design and support. The way it's designed is with the squares on the bottom. And the reason that the squaring, and they call it waffling, the reason it does that is because the squares will push the support forward and backward. So when you walk, it actually pushes in momentum with the foot. So as the support warms up, it gets to where it moves more and more forward and backward with the foot and stays in alignment with the foot. It's a nice strong structure, but it has a flexibility to it.
Does it only work when I'm walking?
No, it actually works even when you're sitting. Some of the balance techniques that they used to use with the Alsner demonstration was one where you sit in the chair and you actually have people put their fingers together and you try to pull them apart.
I remember that.
Yeah, when you don't have the support on, amazing enough, you can pull the fingers apart. When they put the support on, they just put their feet on the ground and put the support on it, you can't pull those fingers apart. Because it aligns the structure immediately. It's an immediate effect, but over time gets better and better as it exercises. But yeah, it brings the tone in the foot. So this support's in the middle, and then we have a support that's softer, and the reason it's softer is because the waffling is very different. It's a diamond waffle. So that's where it gets its name, as a diamond. The diamond works side to side. That's how that waffling works. So when you walk on that support, it's moving to the side. So it feels less aggressive to the foot. Some people need that because they have very high toned in the muscles or very tight muscles. People with high arches, I mean, that's very hard. It won't come down. So having a softer material come up to it is usually what they need and what feels good to them to have that. As that comes up, it's like almost like a lumbar support to them, and that muscle can actually start to relax and let go a little bit and then start getting worked as it softens up a little bit. Mm-hmm. But going off to the side is what the diamond does. It's that motion from side to side. A lot of people don't understand the reason that they're made like that. Another one that we have is the honeycomb. Yeah, this one is a little different waffling completely with the honeycomb. Honeycomb, we all know, is a very strong structure. A lot of times when you start talking about bees and honeycombs and things, people are talking about really strength in the structure, and there's no difference here. With the honeycomb, it goes inward. And even though the material is not that much stronger of a mix of EVA to make that material stronger, it's actually how the waffling pushes it in. So when people have things like plantar fasciitis or issues on their heels where they really need stability, instead of going like a super, super strong metatarsal rise, which is what we had before, we actually don't have a strong metatarsal rise, but a stronger support that holds that foot in position a little bit better when they're walking on it. And as they walk on it, that waffling keeps that plantar ligament happy because it's not being stretched and pulled apart so quickly. Sometimes even with having the classic on it and they have plantar fasciitis, you will see that some people don't get as much relief from it, and it's because it's still pulling forward and backward and still stretching slightly on that plantar ligament. Now the other support we have is the Max. Now a lot of people think this is maximum support there is.
Yes.
We used to call it that for fun, but really it is a very rigid material. And the rigidity is not better. It's just different. All these supports are different. I always said that the supports have personalities. And it's like your feet. You have personalities. Some days you're happy with your feet. Some days your feet are grouchy. And it's the same thing with the support. It just depends on what works for you. There's no right or wrong. I've had a lot of gentlemen who think that they have to work their way up to a Max because that's you know, and that's not true. Some men are very happy in diamonds. But it just depends on what's going on with them. Having maximum control on the foot is for people who have more of a looser muscle structure, is really what it is. So you think of your feet being super tight, high tone, or a bag of bones, really loose. What one's going to be better is going to be something that holds it in position. So when you have, like, you see people with their ankles are on the floor almost, I go to a more harder material product so that way we can lift those feet back where they belong and put them back in the position they need to be. Now sometimes they can't tolerate it. It is again the toleration of the customer's feet or the client's feet, but always start here. And if this doesn't do it, don't be afraid to go up in more strengthening supports or go down in the softer material supports. They have their own reasons why they exist. Every one of them does their own job. In my drawers, I have every support we carry. I do that because how do I know what it means unless I wear it? And I did that right off the bat when we were dealing with different clients coming in with different issues. I needed to understand what they were going through, you know, so that I could explain it in a different way. And so I wore all the different supports. I put them on in the wrong size, wore them through the store for the day, and found out why people come back and told me they had a shin splint feeling is when that support's too short, you're on the front of your toes and it's pushing those shins. Or Achilles heel feeling is because the support was too long and it's stretching the foot out and it's causing the heel to have stress back on the Achilles area. So learning those things when somebody come in and say something like, oh, I know what you need. And changing out supports, there's always been, for some people, an idea that they got it wrong in the start, in the beginning. And that's just simply not true. Not true at all. We get changes in our feet. I talked about changes in your feet when you're exercising those arches and strengthening the feet. Changes are a normal part of our process. So if you have a change in your feet, if you are a really extreme high arch person and they're up here, you wear a diamond for a couple weeks and it drops it down, it will change the size of your arch. That's normal and it's exciting and it's good. And that's what you want to explain to your client. You're getting healthier. Your feet are coming around. Don't be upset that it didn't work. Be upset that it did work and get excited about what you can do now. So understanding that people's feet change is huge. Our industry, and that's the industry of orthotics and arch supports, there is a misnomer idea that your feet can't change. And there's no reason that your feet can't change other than people's perception. I went through a school called a Podorthic school, and that's where the people who actually make supports is called Podorthic. And when I was in that class, good feet was their enemy, and you'll find that out there when you talk to different individuals in the medical field. They don't understand what we do. They think we have a single support we're fitting on everybody. But when I was in that class, they had taken an ink impression of an individual they worked with. They molded a support around the foot, and then they took another ink impression a year later, and they had a little tiny bit of movement on the arch, and they were celebrating. I'm like, what? We get way more of that in 2 weeks, but I didn't say anything because, you know, they wouldn't have listened to me anyway. But people's feet change very, very rapidly, and this is exciting. And that's one of the reasons why I've always invited everybody back at 30 days, is because by the 30 days, they're wearing them enough to where they got to know them. They're wearing them long enough that if there's going to be any dramatic changes, you're going to be able to catch that. And they're also, it's a great time to be able to go back and find out what else needs are in the world, what other things they're doing. Now that they're starting to feel better, a lot of times they're out moving a lot more. Maybe they want to not have to move the supports around and from shoe to shoe. So, you know, we can provide a big service there. And then you can take the time to teach them other cool stuff versus our first initial visit. It's a lot of information in a very short period of time. Most people can't remember half the stuff we say when we're talking to them. They only hear, you know, things like we used to say exercise, or they only hear those little cue words, and then they go home and they don't remember all the stuff. But, you know, you think about it, we get to learn our demonstration how many weeks before we actually go out and how many times. Right. This is one time that a person's sitting in front of you and learning all of that information and very quickly. And so, yeah, it's a lot to take in. So the 30 days is always fun for me. I love that time because they trust you now, they know you, you can actually enhance their knowledge and understand the rest of the product line. All right.
Can I put my customer in two different, like after 30 days, they're used to the classic and their life is good, but they don't want to change shoes, keep changing them. Can I put them, but they like the honeycomb too, but they don't want to give up. Could they have two different strengtheners?
Absolutely, I encourage it big time. And especially, different shoes that you wear, maybe the base of the shoe is not as strong, or maybe it's too strong. So if you have a really solid shoe, you might not like the honeycomb in it, but you might like the softer material support in it, or vice versa. And then also, you know, a dress shoe versus a boot versus, you know, standing all day versus, you know, out working in the garden. There are different needs that your feet need. And like I said, your feet have moods at different days and times. I don't wear the same support every day, but I do find that certain times I go and grab certain supports when I know I'm going to be doing an activity like going out and dancing all night and standing on my feet. Those supports you go and grab. Another support we have is the Hug, and the Hug is a softer material. It's actually quite soft compared to these other supports that we have, and it's a great product for a training wheel. So that's what I call it on the way. So if somebody can't tolerate a more prominent support, putting a Hug on them and working through the Hug to get to where they can wear that support is a great way to do it. A lot of our owners actually sell Hugs along with our 3-step, and that way they have that training wheel built in. And then they just instruct the client once they've gotten into their supports to put these into an extra pair of shoes they wear around the house, or, you know, maybe they have a pair of boat shoes they don't wear very often and that kind of stuff. So it's a great product. It also works really well for young people, since it's not a permanent support, that you can get people into more of a younger group as they grow and their feet grow. Then they're not losing a ton of money by having to grow into one of these. Another support that we have is the SLS. This support here has the gait enhancement on the bottom of it. It's a cool little S. Now, the gait cycle, a lot of people don't understand what we're talking about, the gait cycle. But the gait cycle starts with your heel, it goes through the outside of the foot, across the front, and out the big toe. So that's the cycle of your gait. And a gait cycle is the cycle in which you take a step. It's one after the other. So that's how we're supposed to step. The enhancement here, it naturally starts the heel strike and rolls you through the top is what they do. So it gives you a better propellant is what it's designed to do. It's a really unique product. It's a great support for really tight dress shoes because it's not as girthy as the regular orthotics can be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so this is a great little support that's been added more recent years. Now, a lot of people have questions about what's the difference between an orthotic and an arch support. I hear that all the time. An orthotic is really a product that has the heel cup on it to control the gait cycle. And that's really what it is. So we have several supports that have heel cups. We have supports that are called maintainers that have heel cups. There really are orthotics and not arch supports. We call ourselves an arch support store for the purpose of people understanding what we do. When you talk about orthotics, it really has a negative vibe to it, so we stay away from that word. We don't really want to use that word on the floor. It's not fun, not cool. Don't use orthotics. But that's what an orthotic is. It has the heel cup and it controls that gait cycle, and that's what they're designed to do. The other part of the ending of the gait cycle is we have the Cluffy wedges. I think they're going to be renamed. They just started a contest for renaming the Cluffy wedge. It's after Dr. Clough's name, so it would be a good thing to name it something a little different. But the last part of the gait cycle is when you strike the heel, come across and out that big toe, and if you have a big toe that doesn't strike correctly, it brings that gait off. So when you start over again, it takes your gait off. So that's why the Cluffies work really well with the supports. It also takes pressure off the support when you have somebody who's not getting into the supports really well, and they come back and they're unhappy with the support. See if they have a Cluffy in there. A lot of times if you put a Cluffy in, it'll take the pressure off that support and they'll like it a lot better. And there's another trick we have. This is a forgotten trick that we used to use all the time. And this is for people who have a really hard time with the ball of the support and they're just trying to get used to it. They're just uncomfortable with it. And even though they have the break-in period, they're working through that, they're just not able to get in there. So what we've always done is put a heel cup on the heel of the support, and it lifts the heel a little higher and takes some pressure off that metatarsal rise for a temporary getting into the support, and it takes a lot of pressure off there. Another one is when they don't have enough pressure, is they could use it under the support to bring that metatarsal rise up a little higher. People with neuromas have that issue, and neuromas are simply between the bones of the foot, the nerve is being pinched. It becomes very painful, and so they want to spread those metatarsal rise, metatarsal area out, and the metatarsal rise does that. That's what the Alzner was always wonderful for, is people who have to spread that foot to get room in there, is that neuromas to take pressure off of it. So that's another way to do it as well. But I have had one gentleman over the years, and this is such a odd thing, but he really needed to spread his metatarsal rise to get well. So we did this, but I wouldn't recommend it other than if somebody had a real issue where they just couldn't get enough metatarsal rise underneath there. And it's a temporary fix. That's a 30-day trick when somebody comes back in 30 days. Another good one.
Okay.
What I have up in front of here is our narrow supports. The narrow diamond is one of the coolest supports for people who wear high heels. I don't know if you have many people in that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and we had a diamond contest one year of what to do with the diamonds when it first came out, and that was what we found is we had the winner of the contest was had worked with a client who was a super tiny gal. She was probably only 4 foot tall, but she wore stiletto heels every day of her life and would not do anything different. So we used a narrow diamond in her stilettos, and she just loved it. It made the world of difference to her, and they're wonderful supports for that. They don't cut into the edge of the shoes. You can wear them all day long. They take the pressure off the front of the foot, and that's usually what you're trying to do when you have the heels
Heels
up,
up.
put in the front of the foot anyway. The other narrows are here. We have a max narrow and we have a classic narrow. So if you have people who have narrower heels, usually they'll tell you, I have a narrow heel. Look at these supports along with your wides just to make sure that you get the right fit. It's just a nuance of fitting the correct way. And I think that's all that I can think of. Is there anything that...
Do the narrows also help, like for that neuroma thing that you were talking about, because
They
they can
can.
slide up behind the
Yeah.
metatarsal heads a little easier than the wides?
In the wides, yeah. I haven't personally used it that way, but I know different ones have. Because especially when they're rounded like that, they come up a little bit up into that metatarsal area. That's a good call, Leslie, yeah. Yeah, so strengthen your feet by exercising. It brings the bones back into alignment. They're made from the ideal foot. You know, we're looking for performance and recovery and enhancement and body alignment, people standing straight. I think they come up to 1 to 2 inches taller even, standing straight. Breathe correctly.
Breathing is big.
Yeah. There was a commercial years and years ago of a guy, he was a saxophone player. And that was his whole thing, is he could get a full breath of air when he wore the supports to play
That's
a
awesome.
saxophone.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I never would have thought that would make a difference, but it did.